One of the great lies that is told by the international left, particularly the American left, is the idea that if you have no religion, if you are an atheist, if you are somebody who is in the post-Christian world, well, that really means that you have an alternative ideology called secularism. And the secularism is, in fact, not a form of religion. It's a form of reason and logic. That's not true. It just simply is not true. There are a wide variety of belief systems across the world, and one of them is, in fact, secularism. And secularism has turned into a weird version of paganism in which nature is to be worshipped. Well, one of the ways that you see that is in protesters against the climate, against the heating up of the world, which, again, some of that is anthropogenic, meaning human caused. Some of it is probably not. Well, these protesters believe that they are going to make the world a better place by destroying or defacing monuments, whether it is the Mona Lisa or whether it's the Eiffel Tower or now whether it is Stonehenge. So yesterday, environmental protesters decided it would be an amazing idea to go and spray paint Stonehenge in order to demonstrate that oil is bad. So they are deploying all sorts of chemicals into the air in order to show that it is bad to deploy carbon into the air. The group posted on X, quote, "The Just Stop Oil protesters demanded the incoming government sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels by 2030. Because you can magically declare that alternative sources of energy are not going to impoverish the world and make people sicker, poorer, and live a shorter amount of time if you just spray paint on an ancient historical site, an ancient pagan historical site." There's a sort of weird resonance here. From paganism to paganism, it's like a few thousand-year jaunt into Judeo-Christianity, and now we've apparently moved beyond that into a different form of religion. That's what happened yesterday at Stonehenge. Here's some film of the Just Stop Oil protesters damaging Stonehenge in the name of the climate. And then one of the Just Stop Oil protesters explains precisely why they are doing this incredibly stupid thing.
My name's Neve, I'm 21, and I'm a student at the University of Oxford. Today, I'm taking action with Just Stop Oil to demand that the UK government commits to signing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and promises to stop burning fossil fuels by 2030. To refuse to do so is to warrant death, destruction, and suffering on an absolutely immense and immeasurable scale. Today, we'll be taking action at Stonehenge the day before the solstice. For thousands of years, people have come to Stonehenge on the solstice to celebrate our natural world, to celebrate the beauty of our natural world. But I can't help thinking, what does it look like today and what the heck have we done to it? These stones have stood here for 5,000 years. What will the world look like in 5,000 years' time? What will our legacy be? It's becoming ever more clear that we end the fossil fuel era or the fossil fuel era ends us.
Well, the new religion here obviously involves defacing monuments. It also involves gender non-binariness. And it's this sort of Gnostic religion that exists out there. The reason I point this out is not because I think that it is wildly important that these morons keep gluing themselves to walls and floors and paintings and streets and all the rest of this stuff. I think that actually they're doing their cause a great disservice because it turns out most people object to watching historic objects defaced. The reason I point this out is because the great lie that I talked about a couple of minutes ago, this great lie that secularism is not its own form of religion, is a lie that has been telescoped into American law. This comes up today because the Louisiana governor has now declared that he is going to put the 10 Commandments back in schools, and the left is losing its absolute mind. According to the Associated Press, Louisiana has become the first state to require that the 10 Commandments be displayed in every public school classroom. It's the latest move from a GOP-dominated legislature pushing a conservative agenda under a new governor, which is usually what happens when you have, Republicans in the legislature and also Republicans as the governors usually get a more conservative agenda. The legislation signed by Republican Governor Jeff Landry into law on Wednesday requires a poster-sized display of the Ten Commandments in large, easily readable font in all public classrooms, from kindergarten to state-funded universities. Landry said, if you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, who was Moses, who got the commandments from God. Opponents naturally jumped into action, suggesting that this was wildly unconstitutional. Under the law, state funds will not be used to implement the mandate. The posters will be paid for through donations, so it's not state money. It's just going to say that there has to be a display there. It also authorizes, but does not require, the display of other items in K through 12 public schools, including the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance. Well, very quickly, the ACLU, which is a trash organization, they used to stand for free speech. Now they just stand for radical leftism. They immediately announced that this was unconstitutional and they were going to stand up to it. CNN's Eli Honig, who is one of their legal analysts, he says this is clearly unconstitutional. We'll explain why he's wrong in just a moment and why it matters.
But this is actually the size. This is 11 by 14. This is what actually the size that has to be printed. Obviously, clearly legible. You can read this. And it's just notable that this is what they're saying has to be in each classroom. Yeah. But my first question was, is requiring this regardless of size, does it violate the First Amendment?
Yes, flagrantly, in my view. If you wanted a perfect example of what the First Amendment prohibits, I think this is it. The First Amendment says Congress, government, shall make no law respecting establishment of religion, meaning state entities can't do things that endorse any particular religion or religiosity in general. And if you look at those 10, there are some, I know one of the defenses is, well, these are themes that are consistent throughout civilized society and throughout religion. Shall not kill, number 6. I'm cheating because I'm looking. But, don't kill, don't rob, don't steal, that kind of thing. But there are some commandments that are inherently religious. Observe the Sabbath day. I'm the only God that you may worship. So it's an inherently religious document. I should add, this came up before. In 1980, there was a case out of Kentucky in the Supreme Court, almost the exact same facts, and the Supreme Court said unconstitutional.
Okay, so here is the problem with this particular argument. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, Saudi Arabia recently ended its 50-year petrodollar deal with the United States, which does have the potential to weaken the U.S. dollar. Since 1974, Saudi Arabia has sold oil solely in U.S. dollars, which was big for our global economic dominance. Well, now they're looking at other options. If there is less demand for the U.S. dollar over time, what happens to its value? For reasons like this, I think it's important to diversify some of your savings into gold. You can do that with the help of my friends over at Birch Gold. For over 20 years, Birch Gold Group has helped tens of thousands of Americans to protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. To learn more, text BEN to 989898. Claim your free, no obligation info kit on gold. Birch Gold has earned my trust with their education-first approach, as well as the trust of thousands of happy customers. They understand that navigating financial decisions can be scary. That's why their dedicated in-house IRA department is there to guide you every step of the way. Protect your savings with gold. Text BEN to 989898 to talk to one of Birch Gold's experts and claim your free info kit today. That's BEN to 989898. Text BEN to 989898. The problem is that the United States is not a fundamentally secular country. What I mean by that is that it is not the French Republic. This is a point that was made by Justice Scalia in a dissent in a 2005 case, in which the Constitution of France says France is a secular republic, in which religion is to be excluded generally from the public forum. That is not the United States of America. The First Amendment was designed to guarantee the practice of religion against the federal government. So just to do the history of the First Amendment very quickly here, this idea that there is a separating wall between church and state in the sense that religion is never supposed to impact people's values and how they vote, or religion can never be promoted in the public square, or, in fact, religion generally can never be promoted against irreligion generally by the government, that is also untrue. There's no historical basis for this. The First Amendment specifically says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Number one, this was never supposed to originally be implemented in the states. It took all the way until the 1940s for the Supreme Court to declare that this was now going to be applied at the state level. This is one of the weirdnesses of constitutional law. The first rule is stop looking at the Constitution when you do constitutional law, because the Bill of Rights is specifically applicable to the federal government, not to the state government. In fact, 9 of the 13 colonies had established churches at the time of the Revolutionary War. Connecticut maintained its Congregationalist church, like a state-sponsored church, until 1818. New Hampshire until 1819. Massachusetts until 1833. So well past the establishment of the First Amendment, there were states in the United States that had established religions. Why? Because again, the goal here was to stop the federal government from establishing its own generalized religion that would prohibit people at the state level from having their own religions. The idea that secularism was supposed to predominate in the United States is obviously untrue, and none of the founders believed that. Even the founders who tended toward atheism tended to believe that religion had an extraordinarily positive effect on the body politic, and so the promotion of religion generally was considered a good thing by the founding fathers. As President John Adams wrote in a letter to the Massachusetts militia, quote, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people." George Washington said in his first inaugural address, quote, "The foundation of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality. There exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness." Even James Madison, who wrote the non-establishment clause of the Virginia state constitution, for example, he did so because he thought he was strengthening religion. He thought that if you established a religion in Virginia, it would prohibit the flowering of religion in the private sphere. Thomas Jefferson, the guy who everyone talks about in terms of coining the phrase separation between church and state, recognized, quote, "The moral branch of religion instructs us how to live well and worthily in society." Now, what the courts have done, or had done for the last several decades, is something that is completely unprecedented and stupid. They have read the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause as in opposition to one another. Remember, the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There are two ways to read that, and the Supreme Court has read this in the dumbest possible way. One is that Congress shall not prohibit you from freely exercising the religion, and the second is Congress shall not establish any religion, and it has read them completely separately. And what that's done is it has put them in conflict with one another, because it turns out that if you express your religion freely in the public square, then the Supreme Court might say you're violating the Establishment Clause. But that's never how this provision was meant to be read. They were meant to be read in tandem. The basic idea was you can't establish, say, Catholicism as the official religion of the United States, because in doing so, you will quash the free exercise of people of other religions via compulsion. That is what the Constitution was designed to prohibit, was compulsion in religion. Well, there's nothing compulsory about a sign on a classroom wall. If there was something compulsory about a sign on a classroom wall, there'd be all sorts of serious free speech issues in a classroom, because it turns out classroom walls are filled with all sorts of stuff that's on the walls. Right? Is it violating my free speech if somebody puts up on the wall a sign that says something I disagree with? I'm not sure how that violates my free speech. But the same argument is made about religion, that if I walk into a public school and there is a sign that quotes the Bible in a non-denominational way, by the way, because it turns out that the three major religions, traditionally, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all agree that the Ten Commandments were given to Moses, and they agree on the content of the Ten Commandments. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.